Do you want to know how to polish your crankshaft without going to the machine shop? Well, stick around and find out how with High Voltage Diesel. Here's the plan. There is none. If you want to see exactly how much money that we have into this car right now with our 454 and the bodywork, make sure you stick around till the end of the video. We are going to go through and share all of our expenses and tell you exactly how much money that we have into this piece of junk. So if you're looking to build one at home, you have a ballpark idea on what you're in for. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas here at High Voltage Diesel, because behind me we have some major boxes to unwrap. We are finally going to start working on our prime mover, which is a 1987 Chevy Big Block 454 that I harvested out of a giant RV motorhome thing. Several videos ago, you'll see that I took this motor apart, found out what was wrong with it. It was locked up. And it was locked up because Carl the Rod decided he was gonna give out. So we ended up having to take the whole motor apart. All these cylinders were filled with rust. A couple of them were really bad. So we did some serious honing and measuring and cleaning and pressure washing. And then we let this thing sit for months as we worked on the body of our 1970 Chevy that thing is going in. So I went on a massive shopping spree and bought a whole bunch of stuff. I hope in a couple months I'll be driving this thing to some shows. I've had a few of these boxes so long I forgot what was even in them. We got a Speedmaster box right here. What could possibly be in that? Oh yeah, that's right. We bought all nice quality main studs for our big block to harness all that horsepower we're not gonna have. Okay, box number 2, what's it gonna be? I haven't even opened this one yet. I actually forgot what was in some of these. Oh, we got another Speedmaster box. Before you start typing all your negative comments, yeah, Speedmaster is a cheaper brand, but I actually like the quality of their stuff. We're not buying expensive top-of-the-line stuff for this, folks. This is a budget build. Ooh, look at that. We got connecting rods for our 454 prime mover. Because Carl, the connecting rod, decided to head out. I actually like this stuff. These are pretty good quality. These are actually really, really good quality. I'm very happy with this stuff. These are pretty heavy too. Not that heavy is a good thing, but budget build, you know. Budget build, compromise, you know. I'm pretty happy with these. These are nice. So we're gonna put that back. We got 8 of those because it's a V8. This is just a rear main seal right here. Nothing too special. When I build these engines, I always buy the gasket kit for the engine, and then I always spend as much money as I can on a rear main seal, because like a really nice rear main seal is only like 20, 30 bucks. It is worth it to get a really good main seal, because the last thing you want to do is put the engine in your car and see oil all over because you bought a junk main seal. So get a good main seal, because they're not expensive. Okay, I have no idea what is in this box. I really don't know what's in this box. This is actually exciting because I bought this stuff so long ago that I can't even remember what's in this box. It's like Christmas all over again. I don't even know what I'm gonna get. This box has never been opened before. What is this? Oh! That's right! These are all our rod and main bearings. I called Summit Racing and told them that I wanted a really good brand because bearings are another thing you do not skimp out on. For the price and how cheap they are, you do not skimp out on rod and main bearings, because if you spin a bearing, your engine is junk. So spend the money and get good bearings. Got a nice Summit Racing sticker. I am not paid by any of these companies to give biased opinions on the part. I bought these parts because I think they're pretty good, and I've had good experience with this junk in the past. And if it turns out to be junk, then it's gonna be junk. Oh yeah, another Speedmaster box. Oh, we got our dome pistons, standard bore, because we did not bore this thing out, with a 10cc dome on it. Our stock pistons are actually dished, and our new ones, we did a 10cc dome piston. I don't want to go too crazy. Just a mild dome, no big deal. I didn't want to get a crazy dome and have to worry about hitting the valves and all that. And then you got to run high octane gas. This is just going to be a driver car that's got a little bit more power than stock. I really like these Speedmaster pistons. These things are pretty darn good quality. Now this is pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about this one. This one's even hard to get out. There we go. What do we got here? Check this out. We got a nice Chinesium air gap intake from eBay. Just look at this baby. This thing is mint. No, it is not a top end. I paid $140 for this thing delivered. And look at the quality. Oval ports. The casting is finished off beautiful. The machine work is beautiful. This thing is beautiful. You know what? Some people pay $1,000 just to get a brand name written right here on this. And you know what? Look at this thing. This thing is beautiful. For $140 I paid for this thing. Honestly, some of the quality on this stuff is better than the brand name junk. Okay, we got one more big box left. What could possibly be in here? Nothing exciting in this box. Oh, we got some Jeg stickers. Got a whole bunch of packing things. This is an easy one. This isn't very exciting. Just a gasket kit for the entire motor. Got our head gaskets in there. Pretty much everything. Got our front crank seal. See, we have a main seal right here, but I just don't like the quality of the ones that come with these kits. Of course, I can get a really expensive kit, but this will be fine for what we're doing. Trust me. Calm down. And I got one more box somewheres I have to find. It's like buried in this garage. Okay, I lied. There was two more things. We got a box and a bag. So in our last actual box, we have piston rings. Look at that. Hastings piston rings. These are a decent brand. Again, you want to get decent stuff. You don't want to just get the cheap junk. And last but not least, all the stuff we have now. And we do not have everything. We still have to buy a ton of stuff yet. This is the oil filter adapter. So this engine came out of a motorhome, and the motorhome was heavy, and the engine worked hard, so they put an oil cooler on it. The oil cooler requires an adapter that goes on oil filter housing that is about 4 inches tall, and we don't need that on this car. So we had to get the oil filter adapter so we could just run the oil filter on the engine without the oil cooler. These are weekend projects. These videos that you see on this car, so everything we're gonna get done on this video is in one weekend. So I think this engine had about 20,000 miles on it or so. It's got a little scoring on the journals. Definitely a little bit of scoring on the journals. Nothing major. You can't really feel that much of it with your fingernail, just a little bit. Got a little bit of light rust on it from sitting here. This motor has been taken apart for about 3 or 4 months now and sitting here in a plastic bag. It is time to start getting this thing together. So we're gonna do something that's gonna make everybody say, "You can't do that!" We're gonna show you a trick to get rid of these scratches for our budget build. And I say budget build. Technically, if you want to do a 100-point job, this should be gone to the machine shop and gone through and mic'd and all that fancy crap and had a nice grind on it and polish. This is a pretty cool trick if you're doing a backyard budget build like this and you want to see a rod fly through something. We got some really fine grit sandpaper here. We are going to wrap the sandpaper around one of these journals, like so. We're gonna do a little bit of experimenting together. And we're gonna see what method works good. Yeah, we got a rope wrapped around here a bunch of times. And now we're just gonna take it. We're gonna go back and forth. We're gonna polish that main journal. Well, this is a rod journal. And you don't want to go crazy doing this because you don't want to undersize anything too much because then you'll have some big problem. And you do this at your own risk. All this black on this sandpaper is metal that we're taking off of this crank. So you got to be really careful. We'll get a close-up here and you can actually see it started off looking, the camera doesn't really do it justice. It's hard to tell because this crank's not bad. It's got a little scoring on some of it. But now it is nice and smooth. And we don't want to take too much material off. I use 320 grit on this because that's what I have. I definitely wouldn't suggest going any coarser than that. That's probably pushing it right there. We got another trick up our sleeves. We're gonna take another rope and we're gonna wrap it around a whole bunch of times. I'm kind of worried that this rope isn't gonna work for this. And we're gonna take some metal polish that's got some grit in it. I'm gonna put a little on. I'm not entirely happy with this particular rope working for this. Wipe this off with a clean towel and see the damage that we did. That is one nice polished rod journal right there compared to that ugliness. That is very nice. It didn't take much. I can't stress enough, if you're gonna do this yourself, be really careful not to take too much off because even just a couple thousandths of an inch could lead to a catastrophic failure. So as I've been doing this for about an hour, I found a lot of ways to make it easier and a little bit more simple. So let's share these ideals. So we have our oil passages that run through the crank that just flood the bearings with oil. We're using that to our advantage. So we have our sandpaper. We're up to 2,000 grit right now with a rope wrapped around it. And we're using wet sanding paper. And we gotta constantly flush it out to get the contaminants out. And it's a real pain. So we're actually spraying some WD-40 down in these holes like that. So it goes down in the bearing. And it is doing a really good job. And yes, this does sling WD-40 everywhere, unfortunately. But it is doing a very good job on our bearings. About 2 hours into this polishing job, but it is really important to have a nice polished journals on stuff so your oil just glides right in there. And I found that using a big fat rope like this that's really coarse works perfect for polishing. We're gonna roll this around here a few times. Definitely learned quite a bit doing this. I'm trying a couple different things between just regular rubbing compound they use for body work or actual steel polish. And I'm actually having better luck with the rubbing compound. Putting a decent little amount in there and just getting it all in. This is definitely a lot of work on your shoulders, I can tell you that. We're just going to town here. I'm doing each one probably for about 5 minutes a piece. I did the same thing. I did 320 grit, and then I did 2000 grit. A lot of 2000 grit, probably like 10 minutes on each journal. You're not gonna take that much off with 2000 grit in 10 minutes. And now I'm doing about 5 minutes on each one, putting compound on it about 3 times every few minutes, and that seems to be polishing these things right to a mirror finish. This works really, really good for this, especially if you just want to do a quick polish on your crank and you don't have to cut anything on it. Get our nice rag, wipe that off, and check our work. One thing I could definitely guarantee you is this thing's more polished than it was from factory. Look at how clean that is. You gotta be careful, I've noticed, not to use a rope that's too big. This is pushing it because you want to be able to get all the way in the corners, and if you use a rope that's too fat, you won't be able to get in the corners right here. You got to do the whole thing pretty uniform. But this is looking great. We got this one done, we got that one done, we got that one done. I'm gonna go through after and do my mains, because the mains with all these sharp edges seem to be really tearing the rope up. And this rope's actually pretty expensive. What this is actually the same kind of rope that you would use right here on a wood stove door. It's that, whatever that is. Some fiberglass crap. Right here, this is what it is. It's like that fireproof rope that you use on wood stoves and fireplaces. And that stuff is really expensive. The only reason I'm using that on this is because it's what I have, and I got a deal on a whole bunch of it, more than I'll ever need in a lifetime. More than I'll ever need in 10 lifetimes. It's up to you if you want to go out and spend the money on fireplace rope. But it is working very good for doing this polish. It's holding up very good. That was a workout. Got about 4 hours just into this crankshaft. I got it all wiped down with some 1540 diesel engine oil. Every little piece of it. We blew out all the little passageways for the oil. Cleaned those real thoroughly with brake cleaner and compressed air. And this crank looks beautiful. I couldn't be happier with it. So it's almost a whole day worth of work just getting a crank ready. Oh, what are we gonna do with this thing? It's already starting to rust again. Look at that. In that spot, I wiped this thing down with oil like crazy, but that rust isn't bad. That's just barely surface rust. So last I left it with this block, I took it out and I pressure washed the living crap out of it with a high powered pressure washer and put purple power on it and scrubbed it like 5 or 6 times. And then I blew it all off with compressed air, and then I just doused it in oil just to save it until I was ready. Well, now we're ready. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do all the dirty work first. I'm gonna get these decks clean right here on where the cylinders go. I gotta get all this residual gasket splooge off before I tip it. Then on where the timing cover goes. That way I can get all the dirty stuff, because doing that, it's gonna make a lot of little fine stuff, a lot of dust, a lot of little crap that can get down in there. So there's no sense in putting the crank and the pistons in and then cleaning it after. So as far as cleaning the deck on the block, what we have is we have our little 3-inch angle grinder, and we have these little abrasive scuff pad thing wheels on them. Whatever they're called, I don't know, but this is what they are. You see these in pretty much every hardware store. I suggest getting the finest one you could possibly find, grit-wise. Get the softest one possible, and that's what you could use to get this residual gasket material off of here. Now, I can't stress something enough, so listen up. You have to make absolute sure that you just don't go ape shit on this. You don't want to take off any metal material on this thing. You want to go at a slow speed and just take off the gasket material, and when you start to see metal, stop. And don't just stay in one spot. Go all over the place. That's all you need right there. That's it. You only got a little bit of space right here in between the cylinders. And a lot of times that's where the gaskets blow, is right here. So don't spend a lot of time in any area. Just go real slow, because if you go fast and this thing starts sparking, it means you're taking metal off. You don't want to hold your grinder at a lot of an angle. Hold it so it's almost flat. I'll tell you what, this stuff right here is a sure way to get kicked out of a body shop. See, what happens is you spray this crap right here, and then it travels over here like a ghost, and it gets sucked in the intake of the blower. It goes up that tube right there all the way through the ceiling, and then it just rains down on your car that you plan on painting in a couple months. And then as soon as you paint the car, your first coat, that paint just gets loaded with fish eyes. And then you want to take this can and throw it in there after that happens. So having a mechanic shop and a body shop in the same bay usually doesn't work out into your favor. Let's spin this thing around so we can expose the lower end. And that's where the work site is going to be. On the lower end. So I spent quite a while just going through and cleaning every possible nook and cranny I could with a nice rag, brake cleaner, and compressed air, because you want to get all these oil passages all nice and cleaned out. You don't want anything in them. Maybe it was factory, I don't know, but this entire oil filter housing was just completely loaded with that RTV silicone. Like, I mean, like layer upon layer upon layer of it, and I had to spend a lot of time cleaning that out and getting that all good. I'm assuming probably at one point somebody had a leak in this and they just, you know, loaded it up just to get by. It is what it is. We got everything all nice and clean where our main seal goes, our thrust bearing. We got all where our bearings nice and clean, where the bearings go. You do not want this stuff to rust. Absolutely not, because that will be a bad day for you and your poor engine. Oh boy, we got the new parts broke out. We got our main studs. Beautiful. Look at those quality things. We have our new main bearings right here. Looking good. I like these. These are pretty good quality by the way it looks. So there's a certain step that we have to do this kind of stuff. It's all gotta be done in order. No big deal. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna work on putting our main studs in. We're just gonna put a little bit of oil. You don't need much, just a little bit. We don't wanna tighten these. You just want to make sure they're in all the way. I'm not sure if there's a torque spec to these. I don't think there is. I see a lot of people make this mistake. They will oil the living crap out of these main journals right here. On the block, they will put grease or oil or assembly lube, and that is the wrong thing to do. You want to get brake parts cleaner or thinner or something, and you want to keep these things dry on the back sides of the bearing. Number one, oil is a material that will cause thickness in between the block and the bearing and throw your measurements off. Number two, there's no reason to have oil on the back side of the bearing. The bearing stays in place on the block. The oil goes on the other side of the bearing, and you want as much friction on the back side of the bearing as possible so you don't spin a bearing. What does it mean to spin a bearing? Your bearing seats down in here like this, and when something malfunctions in your engine and you spin a bearing, you'll see right here that there's a little tab where the bearing sits. It means that the bearing spins out of its seat, and when that happens, it usually jams up on the other bearing, and you destroy a lot of stuff. You destroy your crank, you destroy your block. If you catch it on time, you might be lucky enough to have it line bored, but that's usually not the case. You want to make sure back sides of your bearings are dry. There's no contaminants on them, no fuzzies, no nothing. You want to do this super clean, a very clean environment. You take your bearing, just get her lined up. Of course, this is easier to do with two hands, but that's okay. Just get her lined up on there. Make sure she's flush. And that's it. This is where common sense comes in. You'll see that we got two different bearings here. We have one with a line and a hole in it, and then we have the other one that is completely flat. Well, obviously, the one with the hole in it goes there where the oil comes through. Because if you were to take this one and put it in, and it would go right in, it actually wouldn't because your relief here is kind of offset. But in different cases, it could possibly go in if that lines up. You would block off your oil supply, and you probably would get about 2 seconds of runtime, and your motor would lock right up. Same thing goes with your main caps. Nothing has changed. You want to make sure these are really clean. You don't want any oil on the mating surface where the bearings go. Just get your bearings started in there. Just take your time and roll it in. Make sure everything fits right. If you have to tap on it, make sure you use something plastic. Just tap it down into place. Don't ever use anything metal on any of this stuff. There's a reason we put our studs in before we put our bearings in. Now, if you're running bolts, you would obviously not put bolts in. But if you're running studs, you can put your bearings in before your studs. But the problem is if you're human like me, and you accidentally drop one of these studs on this bearing and nick it, you could be talking about disaster. This stuff has to be really clean, really precise, so it's easier to put your studs in. That way you don't have to worry about dropping any tools or dropping studs or oil or anything on any of your surfaces. Then put your bearings in, and now everything's nice and safe. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our main journals only, and we're gonna wipe those off. We're gonna wipe those down so they're clean and there's nothing on them. Now it's time to put the crankshaft in the motor. And before you guys that know what you're doing out there start typing, just bear with me. You'll see the method to my madness. Now is the time to be very, very careful. And I mean the carefulest you've ever been in your entire life. I don't like the way that is. We're hitting on something. Oh, we're just hitting on the engine stand. There's a bolt sticking out right here. We're actually going to put these in a little bit. Alright. You don't want to go turning the crank too much. You just want to make sure it's free. We got our crank in. You want to make sure everything's turning nice and free, but you don't, at this point, you don't want to turn anything. Well, it is day 2 of this engine assembly. It is Sunday. This is the second day of our weekend. These are weekend projects again. It got late last night. It was like 10 o'clock, and it came time to do our next step. And this is stuff that you really want to take your time, and you really want to do it when you got a clear head. So doing it late at night is probably not a good idea. We're not just going to start bolting stuff together. Because this is a redneck build and this isn't done with a machine shop, and even if it was done with a machine shop, you should always double check everyone else's work, even your own work. But because this is strictly a redneck build and we have no idea what our tolerances are, we have to check our tolerances. And that's what this Plastigauge is for. Those who don't know, this Plastigauge is a tiny, tiny, tiny little strip. They make a couple different sizes depending on what your tolerance is. And what you do is you take a little piece of this and you put it on every single journal, and then you put your cap on it, and then you tighten the cap down to the factory specs, whatever these call for, I'm not sure yet. And then you take it back off, and then these little indicators right here, you see how much that squishes to, and that's called oil clearance. These parts actually ride on a small film of oil. Nothing in a motor should actually ever touch another metal surface, and it is very crucial to have oil clearance in between, so all your parts can literally float on a cushion of oil when the engine is running. And they have the specs because as the engine's running and the parts are moving, things are going to heat up and expand, so you really want to get this part right. There really isn't anything to get right in this part. It's basically you have to check. If something's off, you're going to have issues and you're going to have to go to the machine shop or get different bearings or whatever. Hopefully that's not the case with us. Seeing that this crank spins super easy and having built several engines, I think we're going to be in good shape. But you always want to check, because that way you know that you're not going to have any problems, or that you might not have any problem. So our oil clearance that we're looking for is between 20 and 30 thousandths on this motor. And it says right here, this goes between 20 and 60 thousandths. This is the one we want to use, is the red one. When you have big hands, this is definitely a little difficult. You don't need a whole bunch, you just need a few pieces. This is very delicate for, see, like, probably gonna drop a few pieces, guaranteed. It's our tiny little piece. We're gonna put it on top of the journal right there. This is our number one main cap. I want to make sure this surface and every surface is very clean, because this is a crucial part. See, it's stamped number one, and this side here faces forward. These ones here are numbered from factory, but some of them aren't. So before you rip your engine apart, make sure it's numbered. If it's not, then you number it yourself. We're gonna sit this thing down nice and easy. We're gonna put our washers on. This part we could put a little oil on, because we want this to be just like it's going to be torqued finally. And we want to make sure our threads are nice and lubricated. Without lubricated threads, you don't get an accurate torque read. On this step, you absolutely do not want to even think about rotating the crankshaft. You have to remember that. For as fun as this stuff is to play with, keep your hands off it. We're not going to torque anything. We're just going to draw it down, because these caps recess down in here, and your little tiny piece of plastic gauge potentially roll down, and then you're going to have to do it again. So that one's in. We're going to leave it alone. And we're gonna do the rest of these just like that. So we have all of our main caps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all installed. Did not accidentally rotate our crank, which I'm surprised, because I have a goldfish brain. They recommend it's 3 steps, 20 foot-pounds, 50 foot-pounds, and then 75 foot-pounds. So that's what we're gonna do, and we're gonna start from the center and work our way out. So that's what you do with anything you tighten. So we have our 3/8 torque wrench set to 20 foot-pounds. And you don't just want to torque one of these right down. You want to just go little by little. So that's 20. So we're going to do this one. There's 20. There's 20. 20. 20. 20. 20. 20. Okay, now let's throttle our split freight torque wrench up to 50 foot-pounds. Again, we're not just gonna go on one bolt right from 20 to 50. We're just gonna go a little bit on this one, a little bit on that one. Go back to this one. You wanna do these even. Go back to this one. There's 50. There's 50. So now we have our 1/2-inch drive split freight set to 75 foot-pounds. So let's go ahead and get these torqued down. And there we go. Everything is torqued down to the way it should be. Right now would be so tempting just to spin this crank. But man, it is like just, it's all I could do to remember not to just spin this crank around. Because I'm just so curious on if it spins freely or not. Now it's time to take this thing all back apart very carefully. Okay, same thing with loosening these. Just loosen them in the same sequence that you tighten them. So now that we have all our hardware removed, we are going to slowly remove all these main caps. And be careful not to move anything because you don't want to squash your Plastigauge. And you're going to see the cool stuff that this Plastigauge does. Pull these things straight off. There we go. So now that we have all of our main caps off, you can see that more times than not, the Plastigauge usually comes and sticks to the main caps themselves because the journals are really, really smooth. And the bearings are kind of more friction-like material to the touch. So you remember how tiny that stuff was. It was not much bigger than a piece of hair when we put it in there. Look at how much it widened out just in that little bit. So right now I'm just kind of doing a visual inspection, just making sure that nothing looks crazy, that everything looks somewhat uniform and nothing is way more squashed. Now you could see the little pieces of paper they gave us here. You can't really see on the GoPro very well, but we want to be between 0.002 and 0.003, and that is the top red line and the white line under it. So now we're gonna go and we're just gonna kind of match up. The wider this stuff is squished, the less clearance you have. The less it's squished, the more clearance you have. So now we're looking and we're actually starting to notice that we're a little bit out of spec for what it calls for. We're actually closer to 0.004 on most of these. 0.003 is actually a little small, and we are very, very consistent with everything. That's 0.004, so that is actually just a 1/1000th of a clearance more than our factory spec. So what do we do now? Well, you know what, it's basically your discretion. Me personally, I would rather have an engine run a little bit looser, and we're only 1/1000th off. And 1/1000th off, it could be a big deal. However, for this build, what we're doing, 1/1000th off is not going to bother us. In my opinion, this goes with bearings and just about anything with moving parts. You're better off a little bit loose than a little bit tight. Any day, I would rather see a loose engine. A loose engine is a happy engine because this stuff is going to expand. Remember, everything in here is going to expand. Our 4/1000th clearance we got could possibly turn into 2/1000th clearance by the time this thing gets hot. I'm not a genius. I don't know the math and how everything exactly works, but one thing I do know from experience, a looser engine is better. And a looser engine is better for contaminant. When contaminants get in between the crank journal and bearings like dirt or dust or anything that shouldn't be in there, a looser engine, you'll have better luck on it flushing that debris out instead of staying in there and just rolling around. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna record all my stuff and I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it for the future. That way I always know exactly where I am in this motor. So 20 years down the road, if I want to get into this motor again, I remember what I have. I could just take all this stuff. They do make programs on your phone and stuff, but I'm a hillbilly. So we're gonna write on all of our mains 0.004. Now there is one thing that we haven't checked yet with the crank. And if you know what that is, put down in the comment section below while we're putting this thing back together, because we are gonna check that. Sometimes this crap comes off pretty hard because it takes a lot of force to squash this stuff on here. Very, very, very carefully. It is time to do our final installation. So with that being said, we get to open up more presents. We get to inspect our nice main seal. We bought a nice quality main seal for this. We're not going to use the cheap ones that come in the cheap kits. We're going to get nice stuff for this. We're just going to do an inspection, make sure everything looks good. So an easy rule of thumb is when you look at a seal, you'll see that there's a bigger lip on this part than that side. The part with the lip always goes where the oil pressure side is. So that way the oil pressure actually sticks up against it. We're just gonna make sure this fits in here nice. A lot of people like to use assembly lube, motor oil, this, that, the other thing. They like to use a lot of different stuff, expensive stuff. You know what I think is all you need? You can assemble an entire engine with this Lucas heavy duty engine oil stabilizer. This stuff is like honey. It sticks to bearings. It'll give you plenty of time for startup by the time your oil pump builds oil pressure. I personally don't like thick assembly lube because it gets in the way of the oil trying to flood the bearings. Where this stuff here, it's basically oil. It's just heavier duty, it's sticky, it'll stay in the places and give that engine time to start up. You don't even need much, just a little bit. That's all you need. You don't want to overload stuff because again, you don't want oil getting behind your bearing. This is your thrust bearing. This is what keeps the crank from going back and forth. So we also have a bearing face on this side. So we're gonna put a little bit on the thrust side of this rear number 5 bearing. As we're putting stuff together, we're always just making sure everything is loose. So it's time to repeat the process. We're gonna make sure we're happy with everything. We got all of our caps, we got everything lubed up with our Lucas, and this is the final assembly. Make sure you are very thorough with everything. Pay attention to every little detail. What we get now is what we're gonna live with. This is another thing you're gonna see many theories on. You're gonna see people talking about rear main seals. And you'll see that I got on this side, it is up about 1/4 inch and down about 1/4 inch on that side. That means I rotated this. Some people say that prevents leaks. Some people say don't worry about it. I don't know. I don't know the proof, but I've always done it like this. Never had any issues. So basically the one on the block is completely opposite. That way the gap to your rear main seal isn't going to be the gap where your cap is. Okay, we did our first 2 torque sequences. We got 20 foot-pounds and 50. Now we're going to go to 75 that these call for. So now it is the moment we were all waiting for. It is time that we could just take our finger and spin this crankshaft. It's cold out right now, and we have Lucas oil in here, so it's not going to spin super freely. But we can see that nothing is binding up. It spins with a finger very easily. And this is what I was talking about, if you guessed it and put down in the comments. And that is called crankshaft end play, which is very important. So basically what end play is, it is the play that the crankshaft goes back and forth. And you don't want it to be excessive, and you don't want it to be tight. You want it to be somewhat within spec on a build like this. So we have our handy dandy micrometer set right here. You can see that it just kind of does its thing. And we also have a big screwdriver. And with this big screwdriver, we are going to take And we are going to force our crankshaft back to the back as much as we can. Like so, without putting 5,000 pounds of pressure on it, because we really don't want to break anything. This is definitely easier to do at the point where there was no oil in it when we did our plastic gauge, but we didn't want to mess our plastic gauge up. So we're just doing it like this. Now that the crankshaft is pushed back all the way to the end, we're going to set our caliper up here so it is just touching the end. We're gonna zero it out. Now we're gonna get our handy dandy screwdriver and we're gonna force the crankshaft back this way. Now it says our acceptable end play range is between 0.005 and 0.008, so that's what we're gonna try to shoot for. Let's force our crankshaft back this way. And it looks like we are just about 5 thousandths here. So we are at the minimum spec. I wish it was a little bit more. We do have Lucas oil in this thing. I wanted to do it dry like I did with the plastic gauge, but it is what it is. Yeah, we could have took the plastic gauge out, put it back together again, did this. Which probably would be the right thing to do. And if it like didn't move at all, we would definitely have a problem. But you can plainly see that with hardly no effort, this crankshaft moves just fine. So last thing we're gonna do on the bottom side for now is we are going to take our oil filter adapter that we got and we're gonna throw that on. I am gonna pull these bolts back out at a later time and Loctite them. I just don't have any Loctite on hand right now. The only reason I want to put the oil filter on there right now is just to prevent stuff from falling in and getting in. Now that we got this motor all clean, I just want to throw this on. That way nothing gets down in there and it stays a controlled environment. So we are over at our piston and rod station. We have everything unboxed, inspected. I have all these rods and pistons with a number on it. Now these numbers are not what cylinder they go in, not yet, so don't get confused. These are just random numbers that I put on all these rods and pistons, just to basically give everyone a name here. This is Bob, John, Sue, Joe, Pete, and the list goes on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna weigh every piston and rod. This scale is very, very sensitive. And we are going to record all the weights. And then after we get the weights, we are going to come up with different combinations of what rod goes with what piston. And what that's going to do is we're going to try to make every rod and piston weigh approximately the same weight, or put the common ones together. We're going to take our piston, we're going to set it right on the scale. So piston 1 is 829.4. And why don't we just do rod 1 for video demonstration purposes. So rod number 1 is 862.7. So we came up with some figures here. There's 100 different ways to skin a cat, but you know what? This isn't an engine that's gonna spin up to 20,000 RPMs. We're just gonna do the best we can do with our hillbilly cardboard. I'm sure there's computer programs and sites you could punch all these numbers in, they'll come up with the perfect combination. If we were this worried about this motor, what we would actually be doing is we would be taking all these pistons and rods and we would be grinding small amounts off to get everything the exact same weight, so we wouldn't have to worry about mismatching parts trying to get everything similar. But honestly, right from the factory, they most likely didn't do anything like this. I don't even think we have to do this. The only reason I'm doing this is because I have a nice scale and I have the time, and you know what, why not do it? It'll be a peace of mind. And I think it's important to weigh everything, just because you don't want something that's like 4 grams difference than everything else and be like, whoa. Better just to double check everything. Basically took the lightest piston, put it with the heaviest rod, took the lightest rod, put it with the heaviest piston. There's definitely different combinations that we could have did, but we did what we did, and it is what it is, and this is what we're gonna do. So now we're gonna go ahead and assemble some of these, and then we're gonna weigh them, write down weights, and then we're gonna come up with an order in which we wanna actually install them in the engine. We have piston 2 and rod 2. We're gonna go ahead, we're not gonna worry about anything else right now other than weight. We're not gonna worry about orientation. We're not going to worry about which way things face. We're just going to throw stuff together right now. So the next one is going to be rod 3 with piston 7. Gonna throw that together, so on and so forth. I have each one of these sets lettered with a letter A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Basically all we did was came up for a name for the rod and a name for the piston. We married those two together. Those two met at a bar, had a couple drinks together, ended up going home. They got married. Rod 7 is stuck with rod piston 3. Rod 4 stuck with piston 5, so on and so forth. We put them together as a pair. So 1 and 2 go on the same journal, 1692.8, that's an exact match. And then 3 and 4 go on the next journal. We got 1692.9 and 1693.0. That is it's 1/10 of a gram off, which is hardly nothing. 5 and 6, 1692.0, 1692.4. They're 2/10 of a gram off. Same thing with 7 and 8, 1692.5 and 0.7. They are 2/10 of a gram off. Again, I could have worked the numbers different to have different results, but I'm perfectly happy with what we have. This is how it's going to be. It's going to be perfectly fine. We are so close that honestly we don't even have to worry about this. One more little thing I do want to check. I don't have the right tools to do this, but I just want to check and make sure, just because we didn't go to a machine shop. We honed this ourselves several videos ago when we first did this thing. We did a lot of honing on this to fix the rust. We got some, what it's called, piston to wall clearance we want to worry about. This is just kind of one of those things on this motor. It is what it is. It's an older motor. It's not as picky. When you put your piston down in your motor like this and it's loose, don't be worried about it. Pistons, again, you want loose stuff in engines, not super loose, but you're better off having that a little loose than tight, because when this thing runs, everything's going to expand and everything's going to happen, and that's going to get tighter. And the last thing you want to do is you don't want this piston to expand enough to where it seizes onto that block, and you are going to end up with some major problems. There's actually what they call a ribbon feeler gauge for this, but we don't have one. This isn't the ideal tool. This is just a regular feeler gauge. I looked it up. This engine wants between 15 and 30 thousandths, which is a huge window to get away with. So that tells you right there that it's not that important. So 15 to 30 thou is quite a bit of a difference in the engine building world. A ribbon feeler gauge is a lot more flexible than one of these. Typically with these, you want to put the piston at the bottom of the bore like this, because the bottom of the bore is typically, unless you went to a machine shop, the bottom of the bore is tighter than the top. Of course, this is hard to do, but I'm just going to demonstrate it. So you'll see that we got the wobble. We're going to open that right up on that side when we have two hands. We're going to stick our feeler gauge in there for 30 thou, but I'm going to guess this one here is probably about 20 thousandths. We're just going to set the other ones in, go down the line, check that, and then we're going to start assembling the pistons. On these big blocks with the dome pistons, the dome part goes on the bottom, and you'll see why it goes on the bottom. So just look at your head, and there's always markings and stuff on this stuff. And you can see how this head is shaped. You want your dome part to be up in this part, of course, not on that part of the deck. So obviously with the exhaust ports, the dome part goes on the bottom. As far as the rods go, your two tangs right here that you see inside for your rod bearings, these two little spots, when the rod is sitting in the motor like this, you want them spots towards the outside of the motor. So basically, if this rod is going to get blown through the block, which it probably will, you want those two on the outside, and that's the side that's going to say hello first. Piston 1 is completely assembled except for the piston rings. That is a whole nother step. Another thing I forgot about as far as direction goes, you'll see that on this rod right here. You got one side here that's beveled and the other side that's straight. That little bevel right there. That beveled end on each of these goes towards the outside of the crankshaft. And the flat end goes to the adjacent rod. So the two flat ends go against each other. Well, high voltage family, this little bit of work that got done on this 454 Chevy big block prime mover for our 70 Impala, this ate up an entire weekend. There was a lot of thinking, a lot of time, a lot of cleaning the garage, getting ready, turning this place from a body shop into a mechanic shop. So let's get into some of the costs we have associated with this deal today. I have our costs broke down into a few sections here. This is all the bodywork stuff, all the bodywork materials. I started a new column for the drivetrain, and I bought an entire rear brake rebuild kit for the rear brakes, because you could see the rear brakes on this are completely roached. The car didn't even come with drums, and you don't mess around with brakes. So we bought brand new. Our prime mover is a 454. We have some stuff to add on to that. So our total for the bodywork stuff, and that is to get the shell exactly how you see it right now. We pulled the glass out, got all that stuff done, sandblasted, fixed a bunch of rot. We got it painted, channels painted, rear glass. The trunk is ready to paint. The car's ready to paint. We got $1,519, just what you see right here in the shell. And that is including the floor pan. Drivetrain so far. I guess the motor counts as a drivetrain, but we're gonna keep the motor separate because engines alone can be a huge expense, which this one is definitely adding up to be. So we got 246, and our engine we have 983. That brings us to a total of $2,748 we have into this car. We paid $2,000 for the car. I say in every video that that is irrelevant because it doesn't matter how much you made the deal for. I could have made the deal for $10,000 or $1,000 on this car, and it would not change this number. This is the number that matters, so don't pay attention to that. Just under $3,000 we have into this thing.
End of transmission.